Hi everyone. So it's just about 6:03 p.m. and some people are still rolling in, but let's get this panel discussion started. So to all the students, staff, student athletes, alumni, and faculty at UC Merced and UC Irvine, thank you so much for joining us. We hope this will be an empowering discussion on preventing sexual violence on college campuses, as well as in athletic communities. I also just wanted to say that I know it's about to be finals week and things have been so crazy this year. So I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. And I hope that you and your loved ones are all safe and healthy at this time. My name is Kalani Phillips, and I'll be moderating the discussion tonight. I'm currently a second-year MPH student at UC Irvine and an active advocate for sexual violence prevention and mental health among both students and student athletes. So for some background, this event was born out of a partnership with UC Speaks Up and Courage First, an effort to help prevent abuse and offer resources to those who might need it most. UC Speaks Up is both a research and sexual violence prevention initiative across multiple UC campuses. And Courage First is an abuse awareness program that aims to educate adults and teens on sexual abuse and predatory behavior. We're also hosting this discussion to celebrate United Nations 16 Days of Activism Against Gender Violence campaign. And we're so excited to educate, create awareness, and engage with the difficult topic at hand. UC Speaks Up and Courage First are both continuing to host these virtual screening events across the University of California campuses. So if you're interested in hosting a screening and discussion for your class or organization or club, please email Camila Tan, our amazing event coordinator. Email address will be provided in the chat box, and it's going to be included in a follow-up email as well after this panel discussion. I'd like to also offer a general reminder that tonight's discussion may be triggering for some people. So we strongly encourage you to practice some self-care during and after the discussion tonight. We try to make this a super safe space for you all, and we all understand how sensitive of a topic this is. So it's okay if you need to get up and take a break from the discussion, move around and stretch and drink some water. Actually, why don't we, this is like my first time moderating. So how about we just do some self-care right now and like take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. So let's take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And remember that you have the following resources available for your support. And you can find these resources in the chat as well. But just remember, you could always visit ucspeaksup.org/resources, the UCI Care Office, the UC Merced Care Office, or the National Abuse Hotline, which you can call or text at 1-800-422-4453. And then now I'm pleased to introduce Lynna Cano at the Valley Crisis Center, who will give a brief introduction of VCC and the resources it offers to UC Merced students. Lynna, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynna Cano. I am a victims advocate with Valley Crisis Center. And so I work with Valley Crisis Center. I am stationed at UC Merced in the care office. Some of the services that we do provide, and I may be talking a little bit fast because I just found out I have 2 to 3 minutes, okay? So we'll get through this. So a little bit of the services that we do provide within the Valley Crisis Center is a 24-hour crisis line. All services that are provided are free and confidential to individuals who have been impacted by dating, domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and human trafficking. We are a dual victims agency. And so 24-hour crisis line, and we will add that information in the chat. I'm not sure if we have that information also in one of the slides here, but we will add that information as well as my advocate cell phone. So if individuals have questions, concerns, feel free to reach out to me. I will be available during this discussion to answer any questions. We understand that individuals may get triggered, like mentioned, so please feel free to contact our emergency lines as well as my line. We provide emergency safe house, like I mentioned, so we have a 24-hour crisis emergency safe house as well as transitional housing. And I would go into more detail, but if you do have questions, please feel free to contact me. Our peer counseling and group counseling within our agency, as well as legal services. So legal services may look like a restraining order or accompaniment and support in a criminal matter. And so I always like to say I'm not an attorney, but I'm there to assist and help support navigate the criminal justice system, as well as providing that extra support for individuals through the process. We also provide campus support. So like I mentioned, I'm stationed here on campus. We have about 34 advocates within our center. And so we have advocates all through Merced County, and Merced County has about 250,000 resident population in Merced County. And so we're fairly small, but we are located throughout the county on campuses like the Valley School, which is the intermediate high-risk students that are like their second chance, right? And so we're there to provide them with education and prevention also within the campuses. And so those are the services that we do provide. We do provide academic support, Title IX, and student conduct support, law enforcement support. And so if it falls under our program, we will do our best to work with individuals to kind of navigate what it looks like, what can we do to assist and help survivors with the process and the trauma that has occurred. So thank you all for your time. I'm going to go ahead and leave my information on the chat, but if anybody has questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to give us a call, either the 24-hour crisis line, which is the 209-722-4357, or directly to me, to my advocate cell phone. Like I mentioned, I will be available during this hour. So my number is 209-386-2051, 2051. I will leave that information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynna. And to all the students here from UC Merced, Lynna and the Merced Care Office are wonderful resources for you, and I recommend reaching out to them if you need any help. And if you need any help during this call, just remember that you could always reach out to her too, just like her number that she just gave. So to get this out there now, I'd like to add that if you have any questions for our panelists, please enter them using the Q&A feature at the bottom of our screen, and we will do our best to answer them. And after tonight's event, you're actually also going to be sent a short survey that's crucial in our ongoing research to help prevent sexual violence. So please take the time to fill it out if you can. And additionally, by filling out the survey, you'll be entered to win one of many exciting prizes. So just so you all know, we have an absolutely incredible panel for you all today. So next, I'd actually like to introduce our amazing panelists for the evening: Amanda Thomashow, Nicole Leon, and Carter Timon. So to start, let me introduce you to Amanda. Amanda is a sister survivor featured in At the Heart of Gold. She is now an advocate who works to create systems that prevent gender-based violence and support survivors. Her experience being at the center of one of the country's largest sexual assault trials has inspired her to found Survivors Strong. Amanda serves on advisory boards and has received multiple awards for her groundbreaking work. Next, we have Nicole, who I'm so happy is here. Nicole has been with UCI as a care advocate for 3 years now and has advocated for survivors of domestic violence, stalking, and sexual assault since 2010. Nicole graduated with a BA in psychology from UC Santa Cruz and earned her MSW at USC. Throughout her career, she's developed and implemented programming, co-facilitated support groups, and created workshops for survivors. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Carter Timon. Carter is the lead social science researcher at Child USA, where he conducts research on the prevalence of abuse in elite athletics and assists the Game Over Commission, which Global Sports Development is proud to sponsor, in their analysis of the USA gymnastics case. And he also received his BS in psychology, linguistics, anthropology, and sociology from Ursinus College and his Master of Behavioral and Decision Sciences from the University of Pennsylvania. That's amazing, by the way. Carter also uses his experience from across the social sciences to produce new research that can help prevent abuse and advocate for justice. So before we start, I just want to say thank you all for being here and being willing to share your expertise and experiences and provide value to this conversation. It means so much to me and everyone else that you would take the time and out of your day to participate on this panel. So on behalf of both UC Irvine and UC Merced, I want to extend a huge thank you to you all. So thank you for being here. Now let's jump into our discussion. So Nicole, I'd like to start with you. Why do you work that you do, and what resources are available to students at the CARE office?
Sure, and just say it's an honor to be here, and thank you all. Yeah, so to kind of answer these questions, so I am genuinely passionate about working with survivors of sexual violence. Many of the people in my life are survivors, and in particular, my Nana, whom our family lost earlier this year. Her strength and warmth had a huge influence on me. I do this work in large part in honor for her. I've also seen personally how this type of violence affects not just the individual, but the loved ones of those individuals. And it makes me that much more dedicated to fostering a society where sexual violence is eradicated. To talk a little bit about the CARE office, we are a confidential, non-judgmental resource where students, faculty, and staff can come to seek support. We will see folks regardless of when the interpersonal violence took place and whether or not they choose to report or have even told others in their life about the incident of violence. We are a mighty group of 10, plus a few interns. We have 3 advocates, 2 violence prevention coordinators, our FAIRS director and assistant director, our wonderful office assistant, a fabulous marketing specialist, and a dedicated grants manager. Our advocates work directly, that's me, with survivors seeking supportive services and offer assistance navigating the Title IX or criminal justice system, connect folks to resources on or off campus, and assist with supportive measures related to housing or finances, for instance. Our violence prevention coordinators work to actively shift the culture of sexual violence and sexual harassment on campus by implementing programming and providing direct education and opportunities for discussions to students, faculty, and staff. Our assistant director implements our holistic healing programs such as yoga for healing, self-defense, managing our lending libraries, our playlists, and other downloadable resources that are available on our website, care.uci.edu. And the rest of our fabulous team does much of the behind the scenes work that is absolutely essential to the functioning of CARE.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so glad that you're working at the CARE office. I'm so happy that you're here and able to be a panelist. And I'm glad that you were able to talk about all the resources that the CARE office provides to students. I hope that everyone here is now aware of what's available to them, because it's so unfortunate how many students go through a college experience not knowing that they can access all of these resources. So thank you so much. And my next question is for Amanda. So Amanda, I know this has been quite the journey for you. Could you tell us a little bit more about how your experience as a survivor impacted your decision to go into the work that you do now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually, so I decided, or I kind of knew that this was going to be my work for a long time. I was an advocate long before I was a survivor. So my personal experience as an advocate kind of more informed me about what I should do when I was faced with a decision about what to do in the aftermath of sexual assault. So this has been something that I've been passionate about for since high school. I remember back then I was already making sure that I was advocating for other students around me that were in harmful situations and stuff like that. And so it took me a long time to officially make it my work. But it's always been something that I've been really passionate about, is making sure that we live in a world where you're free from being afraid of violence being enacted upon you based on your gender. So it's always been something that I'm really passionate about.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad that you're here and able to do that type of work and have been an advocate for so long. We need more people like you. So it's amazing. And I'm so happy that you're here. My next question is for Carter. So Carter, is lead social sciences researcher at Child USA. Can you tell us a bit more about the work that you currently do and how it's fueling positive change for survivors across the country?
Sure. First, I just want to say hello and thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. For those of you who aren't familiar with Child USA, it's the nation's leading child protection think tank. So we do have a legal arm and a policy arm, but I run the social science arm. So I conduct and manage all of our research projects, which each have their own goal, but together shed light on abuse and eventually prevention. Our biggest projects at the moment are our study of elite athletes and the prevalence of abuse, physical, sexual, and emotional, and our survey, which is forthcoming, of the survivors of the gymnastics case. We've also analyzed thousands of cases of data of victims of the Boy Scouts, and as well, we've surveyed victims of church members, especially in cases where the church declares bankruptcy and then withholds settlement money from those victims, to get at what their experience is like and how can we better that in the justice system. And finally, I just want to mention that we're also working on a project with a team at Vanderbilt University for the CDC, in which we're assessing a school-based prevention program to stop abuse before it happens. So that's mostly what we're working on at this time, but it's always shifting, always changing.
I'm actually really glad that you brought that up because, I mean, with this film, obviously it was focused on the experiences of these young women and young girls, but I'm glad that you brought up that you are also doing work with boys as well, because a lot of people don't realize that this is an issue that both genders have. This is something that goes on with so many young kids and so many people. So I'm glad that you're doing the work that you do and trying to help protect these vulnerable populations. So thank you. I'm so happy you guys are all here. So thank you so much for being here again. My next question is for Nicole. So Nicole, working to reduce negative stigma around sexual violence is critical. And what is a misconception that you often see in this field?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think similar to what was shown in the film, and to maybe go just a little bit deeper regarding sexual assault in particular, people often think that a person who has been assaulted might want to tell somebody or report the assault right away. And if they don't, then maybe they're lying, or perhaps they are lying. But in reality, survivors don't often tell anybody of the assault, right? And much less so authorities or even trusted loved ones. So in our office, for instance, the majority of folks we see have not reported to law enforcement or the Title IX office, and many of the students I work with don't want their parents, for instance, to know about this. And there are so many reasons that a survivor does not come forward. Some of them can include shame, disbelief, fear of retaliation, fear of not being believed, and all of those are very valid reasons. And I've seen many survivors have all of these experiences.
So kind of just going off of that last question, how do you think that we can combat these negative stigmas on our campuses and help students understand the importance of reporting and feeling like they can come forward with their experience?
Yeah, so to combat negative stigmas on campus, I think a huge part is accessible educational programming. And an even more important now, I would argue, is really leaning into kind of hard conversations by calling in our friends and colleagues and loved ones who hold some of these false and negative beliefs. And this is not easy to do, but I do believe we are currently seeing kind of a cultural shift where we're more open to kind of having that type of dialogue. And I'm really excited for the possibilities of what our society is going to look like as we kind of lean into those harder conversations. In regards to the reporting aspect, I might slightly disagree here. And the reason why is really because I'm an advocate, and my lens of this is really much from an advocate's point of view. And from an advocate's point of view, reporting is always an option, and it can certainly feel empowering for a survivor to report. But I would never ever want to stress the importance of reporting to a survivor. And the reason for this is because I want to be as trauma informed as possible when working with a survivor. And I want to give them the opportunity to have full control to make an informed decision on their own and not feel pressured or forced to report. And this is common. I feel like a lot of folks I work with, a lot of students I work with feel the pressure from parents or loved ones to report. And that can feel really just overwhelming. I might let them know, or I definitely let them know that I'm here to support them in whatever decision that they choose to make. And I might be there, to talk through some pros and cons and to kind of help them make that decision. But always most important and most trauma informed is letting them choose if and when they want to report. And I'll also kind of mention here too that what happens in the film where a person who's accused of sexual assault, is charged and convicted is unfortunately really rare in our current criminal justice system, right? And so I'm really honest when I work with folks too, because I think reporting can be a very hard thing to do, and it can just feel even more so disappointing if one's hopes for charges and a conviction are just not met. And so I like to be very realistic with the folks that I work with and let them know that it's rare, but not discourage them or dissuade them for doing it in any way. But I don't want them to have an expectation, like high expectation for, a charge and conviction, and then just feel so disappointed by that not happening.
Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning that. I mean, it's definitely important that you're here to talk about these things, because I'm learning new things as we go through this discussion as well. And it's so important to think about the advocate perspective as well, and thinking about what the victims are going through. And I totally agree that you shouldn't force them to report. But thank you so much for that feedback. It was really good, Nicole. Thank you. So my next question is for Amanda. What kind of educational or athletic culture do we need to create in order to help these survivors feel safe to come forward? Oh, you're still muted.
Well, in order, I guess, so if we want survivors to feel comfortable coming forward, we need to create an environment where it is safe for them to come forward. And Nicole, I just loved everything you said. I really think that it is really important that we let the victim or the survivor of any crime kind of be like the guide for healing and justice, and not so much let like all these systems that we've been told we're supposed to, put our trust into. Maybe we should not force people to do things that aren't right for them. And so the earlier question that I answered was kind of about how like being a survivor led me into this work. And I think that for survivors, it was being a survivor without access to services that made me want to actually start an organization where we show up and provide services for survivors. So your question about how do we create like an environment that is safe? I mean, I would just start with who does a survivor go to, and that person has to be safe. So it's a lot of like self-accountability and making sure that if a survivor comes to you, you will be a safe place for them. And that's like a place that's free of judgment, and a place where you're not going to be trying to tell them what to do or expect them to react the same way that you're reacting or that you would react. It's you got to meet them where they're at, not where you want them to be. And we just really need to have like an entire culture. So it's not just sports, it's not just education, it's our entire community kind of needs to rethink some things maybe, and think about what it is that we find important and what do we prioritize. Because if we want to live in a world that prioritizes people, when somebody comes to you with a story of sexual violence or any sort of crime, but specifically right now because we're talking about gender-based violence, you just have to have somebody that's like, how would you, I don't know, just you got to show up and you've got to believe them and know that they're going to know what's right for their healing and justice. And just think that it's really important to let the survivors kind of like guide this, and instead of making assumptions for what we think they would want, like actually let them speak up and listen to them, not just ask them to show up, tell their story, rehash their wounds, and then not give them any support in return, which I think a lot of our current systems do. So we have to make it safe. If we want people to come forward, you got to make it safe to come forward. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I definitely agree. I mean, we saw in the film itself, like how these institutions and the culture that were in like the expanded environment these young girls were in kind of perpetuated his behavior and allowed it to happen. And so like, I feel like things need to change from the top down, but also social norms need to change. Like everybody needs to realize that this isn't okay. Yeah. And so much needs to improve.
Yeah.
Like these institutions should not be allowing this to happen. They should be protecting these young girls.
Right. I mean, institutions should be protecting the people, like, period, not dollars and power. Like, that's not what, I mean, maybe when we look at the roots of this country and the institutions, we'll realize that the roots aren't that great after all, and they were about protecting power and profit instead of people. But maybe it's time to, I don't know, reevaluate that. Like, I don't want to be a part of an institution that allows people to be hurt just to, you know, so that I can be doing better in the world or something like that, or I can have more influence or something like, you know, along those lines. And thinking about, so honestly, I kind of for a second forgot we were even here about that movie specifically, because it did happen along like a while ago, and for me, and been trying to work through it and stuff. But when I think about that movie, I don't know if it was clear from it, but I was not a gymnast. I was not a competitive, like, any athlete at all. The only person I compete with is myself, because I'm not very good at any sports. And so I was free of all of that culture that was telling the athletes to push their bodies further than they should and continue to fight through the pain. So if you're telling your little kids fight through the pain, period, then when somebody's putting them in a painful situation and it's somebody that's in a trusted position of authority that you're telling them is going to make them the best, which is what you've already prioritized, like, what is the incentive to speak up for in a situation like that? Like, I wasn't a part of any of that culture. The only medals that I had ever gotten were for like writing and things like that. Like, no sports. Yeah. So I didn't care if I didn't get to go back to the coolest doctor in town, because and I didn't care if I didn't get to go back to practice later that day. I didn't care if my coach was going to be mad at me, and all of those things. Like, it wasn't going to jeopardize my gymnastics career or my sport career or anything like that. It was like, I was a 24-year-old who was studying to be a doctor, who had a long history of advocating for survivors before then. So like, it wasn't safe for me to come forward, but of all of the 500 plus women that have come forward at this point, like, if there was anybody it was going to be safe for, it was me at least to lose, so we have to make, because I hadn't been told for my whole life that like my worth was determined by my body and my sport. So, you know, lots of things to think about. That was a whole tangent, but.
No, I'm glad you brought it up, because I agree. Like, that's something that I recognized in the film too, that these weren't just regular young girls. Like, these are girls being put under an immense amount of pressure, and I can't imagine what that feels like. And another thing is, you have to acknowledge the power structures going on and at play. Like, I mean, a lot of gender-based and sexual-based violence it stems from a power struggle within that relationship, and someone wanting to assert their power and assert their dominance on another person. And that's not okay, and these institutions allowed it. And so like, it kind of shows that we need to do more to protect these young women and these young, like, everybody that this happens to. So this kind of leads into like my next question for Carter. So Carter, what do you think that friends, parents, and caregivers can do to be aware of and kind of just prevent their loved ones from experiencing sexual violence in the first place?
I'm going to echo my wonderful co-panelists here, because I just agree with them so much. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind actually is almost always, and it's very good advice, minimize one-on-one alone time with other adults, right? Like, this is especially true for the parent-child relationship, if you're parenting a child. But as we've seen in the film, this doesn't always work, right? It can get much worse once the predator is alone with the child. But it's not, unfortunately, a cure-all. But like I said, I want to echo my wonderful co-panelists, because what I think personally from all the different research I've read is that probably the best thing you can do as a friend or as a caregiver or as a parent is to encourage positive growth and mental health for that person in all aspects of their life, right? Kids are much less likely to suffer abuse if they have what's called in the research a defensible space, so like a room that they can run to with a lockable door, which is one reason why if your parent removes the door from a bedroom, it becomes incredibly problematic because the child can no longer feel safe within their own home. But this is the same in adult relationships. If you can't get away from that person, then you can't ever feel safe if they do anything you don't like, because they're always present. So, I mean, things like a defensible space, a strong social network with good friends, sufficient play and hobbies, really touching into your passions. And especially, I think caregivers miss this a lot in our culture, having a relationship with the child, or if it's a friend, having a really good relationship with your friend is one of the most important things. The child doesn't want to be in a command hierarchy. They don't want to be ordered around. Now, of course, they need to learn the rules of society and what can and can't be done. And that's when a parent steps in and says, oh, you know, that's not something we usually do. We don't throw our ice cream on the ground. But a child needs to be related to. A friend needs to be related to. And when they feel that way, they're much more likely to talk about anything that comes up. And they're much more likely to know what a healthy relationship is because they're in it. It's being modeled. So your friend, you're modeling that positive relationship for them. So when red flags start coming up with a potential predator, that person, that friend or that child is much more likely to recognize them and get out of there because of the healthy relationships they have elsewhere in their life and the positive things they have. If they're, like going back, I said, playing. If they're playing regularly, then they know what joy feels like. They know what happiness feels like. And if they're never getting it in this friendship with some other potential predator, then that's a red flag and they'll get out of there. So what I think, there's no one thing that we can say, you know, this is what will prevent it. But what you can do as a parent or a friend or caregiver, I think the best thing you can do is really encourage a positive mental life for that person and a positive life in general, physical as well. So I think that's what I see summing up. I hope that made sense.
It definitely made sense. And thank you so much for bringing all of that up, because I agree. I mean, being a public health student, and I'm personally interested in research with social support. So I've learned so much about how important social support and emotional support is with your physical and mental health. And especially with children, like, people don't realize how they think like, oh, this is just a kid, just like hang out with them, just like give them their toys, blah, blah, blah. But people don't realize how important it is to form a real connection and relationship with kids and really just try to understand them, because that's so important to them. And it's so important for their mental health and growth as a person. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. Thank you so much, Carter. My next question is for Nicole. So Nicole, speaking of campus culture, what are some of the current barriers in the Title IX system for student victim protections, and what improvements can we make to them?
Yeah, good question, I think. So the Title IX process itself is just a bit inaccessible to students, I think, in particular. And what I mean by this is it's hard to understand. And the written policy is just filled with legalese. And if it's hard to understand, then how truly can students make informed decisions about how to access their rights and exercise their rights? It's also a really just tough experience for survivors to go through. It kind of mocks the criminal justice system in a way where, you know, to engage the process, you're going to be interviewed about details of the incident, potentially more than once. And then you're having sort of this third party make a decision about, if there's enough evidence to support if a policy violation has occurred, and all of that can feel really overwhelming and even invalidating. I'm fortunate, we're fortunate at UCI because our Title IX office does a really good job of being trauma informed and simplifying and thoroughly explaining the process. But they still have to follow the procedural guidelines that are set forth by UCOP, the University of California Office of the President, as well as the newly implemented ones set by the Department of Education. And those were set in mid-August. And another part of this process, I think, is the hearing. It can result in a hearing, right? And so this is where a survivor is going to be asked questions and cross-examined in front of the person who has caused them harm. And this is hugely intimidating. And so many of the survivors I work with feel just really overwhelmed by this part of this process in particular. And so to improve it, I think it's hard because we really have to, our Title IX offices across our country, right, have to really work with the policies that they're given. And right now it's the DOE one, right? And some campuses like ours have their own sexual violence, sexual harassment policies as well that they can implement. But I think, making sure that everybody involved in that process is trauma informed. And that's not just to the benefit of the survivor, but also the benefit to the respondent as well, right? And making it more accessible. So simplifying things as much as possible, like pulling out those legalese words and making it a streamlined process that can actually be followed. And I'm really a fan of flowcharts. Our campus has a couple that they use to help people understand the timelines and understand the process a little bit better. And that just makes it so much more simple. And just it's more trauma informed. And I think kind of other improvements we can make, and hopefully that'll come down the line, especially with this new administration that'll be coming into office in January, is just changing some of it, especially some of the DOE processes that exist right now. I think they need to be changed, and they're not very trauma informed, and they really do lend a lot of bias to the respondent. And I think once, it just needs to be changed. So if that can just be changed, that's not going to come for a while, but that'll make a huge difference to improving it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Nicole. I mean, I know there's been some recent changes because of the Trump administration, but I'm hoping with this next president that things will be better and there could be some improvements ASAP, especially that are trauma informed. And to move into our next question, I know that the film highlights different elements of grooming. I actually didn't know what grooming was before the film. So they highlight things like gift giving, texting, and inappropriate social media interactions. So Nicole, are there any other kinds of grooming that college students specifically should watch out for? And then Carter, this question is for you as well, but could you also tell us a bit more about the relational and behavioral aspects of grooming after Nicole?
Sure. I can go first. So I think other things to watch out for, and I think Carter spoke to this too, is isolating, right? So if someone were to isolate somebody, I think that's just, or wants to isolate somebody, that's just a huge red flag, whether that be, maybe somebody is intoxicated and somebody offers to take them home, right? And it might seem very like they're trying to help them, for instance, but it also can lend to, these types of events happening. So just, I think that's something to be mindful of, paying special attention to one person in particular, right? So we might see like power dynamics happening here where a professor or something pays like special attention or gives special favors to like a certain student. And I think that too can be a bit of a red flag and kind of like a sign of, okay, is this like some grooming that's kind of happening here? So those are kind of the ones that I was thinking of. And I don't know if Carter has, as sort of another expert on this, has some more information that they'd like to share about that.
Thanks, Nicole. I think that was great. I think the only one I would really add in there is like privileges and rule breaking, especially among the college student population. Just like that's part of the special treatment, though, that you mentioned, Nicole. And I think Kalani had asked about sort of more of like I guess the research-based definitions of grooming. So I'll get a little technical for a moment. But I mean, it's been hypothesized that it's a multi-stage process, and we often talk about abuse in terms of behaviors. So of course, when we talk about grooming, which is the lead up to abuse, we talk about behaviors as well. But the little issue that researchers run into is that a certain behavior, like gift giving, is not necessarily bad, because gift giving at Christmas happens all the time. And if it doesn't happen, you're going to be quite upset usually, if your parent or something doesn't give you a gift. So there's also something there about context, about the human relationships involved, right? When is gift giving okay? Who can a gift come from and who can it not come from? So when we're thinking about grooming and thinking about abuse, I like to sort of rethink how to keep an eye out for it. We have one eye on behavior and one eye on the relationship. So is the person attempting to manipulate or change a normal social relationship? Because that's what abuse is. It's twisting and converting some normal social relationship, like to a coach and an athlete, a professor and a student, or to student, into something not right, into something that's not fair, that's uneven, that allows one person to do horrible things to the other. So a lot of the grooming process is bonding. It's the friendship bonding behaviors. So when we're looking for that, I would I guess just keep an eye on the fact that it's not always just about behavior. It's about, is this person moving really fast? Are they overstepping boundaries? Are they overstepping my boundaries? What are my boundaries? You know, and is this comfortable? Is it professional? Are other people having these sorts of relationships? And do I think that's okay? And I think those are really important questions that we can sort of skip if we just look at behaviors. And that's why I like to bring up that relational aspect, if that makes sense. I'm seeing nods, so that's good.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, because I didn't know about grooming until I watched the film, and I was like, wow, like this is something that even I don't know about, and I'm an advocate, and it was just crazy like learning that through the film. And another reason is like you said earlier, like if you're like, a lot of these people that this happened to, all kids in the film, they're kids, and like if you're a kid and you don't have many healthy adult relationships, you're not going to recognize the ones that are unhealthy. And so it's important, like you said earlier, that these kids have healthy relationships with their parents, with other adults, with their family members, so that they know to look out for those things and know what their boundaries are and what isn't okay. So this kind of leads into our next question for Amanda. So in addition to grooming, there's also another term that came up in the film, gaslighting. So could you explain what that term means and how it applied to your situation, as well as like so many other people that deal with this?
Yeah, yes, definitely. So gaslighting is kind of like, it's a huge tool that people who perpetrate abuse use. And in my case, the gaslighting was MSU telling me that I didn't understand that I was being sexually, or that I had been sexually assaulted. Them trying to convince me that I did not understand my own perception of reality. And so that's basically what, kind of like in short, that's what gaslighting is. It's like a kind of an emotional abuse, and you see it a lot in like abusive relationships, or I mean, yeah, like toxic friendships, things like that. So it's where one person manipulates the other person through like thoughts and their memories, and kind of like makes them question their reality. And well, it's kind of like, it's a process. So there are things that you can be mindful of, kind of like for with the grooming, you're watching behaviors as well as, you know, relationships, and you're keeping an eye on mental health and physical health of everybody involved. For gaslighting, if somebody is it's kind of, it can be, you know, a quick thing, but it's usually more of like a process. Somebody starts by telling you lies, just blatant lies, so that it's like it's so obvious that they're lying that you kind of all start just questioning everything that they are saying. And then they'll, you know, deny things that you have proof of, make you question like your perception of an event by telling you that that's like not how they remember it. And then kind of just slowly but surely like breaking down your mental, my cat decided to come and join us. Your like mental boundaries a little bit. So, and they make you question yourself, it makes you question yourself, your relationships, your own kind of worth. And so as somebody like continues to gaslight you, or in that one moment is gaslighting you, you kind of like throw out you're trusting yourself, and you start just trusting them instead of yourself. And so I think that's a huge way that people are able to perpetrate violence, is by getting you to question reality, so that you don't know necessarily if what is happening to you is wrong, or if maybe you did something that deserved it, or you asked for it and you're not sure if you did. And so I was gaslighted by a number of people, starting with Larry himself. He tried to convince me that it wasn't, right there during his procedure, like he tried to make it legit and tried to make me question my own sanity by like immediately after assaulting me and me calling him out, stopping him, and he had to like go and like get himself ready over in the corner before he came back and talked to me. He like acted like nothing had just happened. Like he sat down at the computer and then tried to book an appointment with me and was like, okay, so I need you to come in a few weeks. And it's just like, oh my gosh, wait, how, this is not what happened. So like immediately my perception of reality was like questioned. Luckily I went directly from there to a therapist's office, so I got to like figure things out. But that already had me, I left there not knowing. I was like, he acted so normal. Am I wrong? And then the next people that participated in the gaslighting campaign were MSU. When I told them, they tried to tell me that like, they're like, well, we understand that it felt like abuse, but according to 4 experts in the field, which were all women, they failed to mention that they were also like his friends that he worked with. It's like they all think that this was a reasonable procedure, so you're the one who has misunderstood. And again, they're like they're telling me that women doctors said that this was legit, so they're trying to get me to question my reality, and in hopes of me changing my mind and not like, I don't know, trying to erase it and then not continuing to fight. So it's a huge tactic that abusive people that are perpetrating abuse can use.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that experience at all. But sharing your experience here is obviously going to benefit a lot of women, because then they're going to be able to advocate for themselves. And I'm happy that you were able to advocate for yourself in that situation and knew what to do and where to go. I'm sorry that they didn't help you. That's freaking ridiculous. But that just shows you how it needs to be a change from the top down. Like, we need to change the culture. We need to change these people in charge. We need the institutions to care. And so thank you so much for sharing that. I actually didn't even know what gaslighting was until a few years ago. So I'm glad that you were able to educate everyone else if they didn't know about it.
I learned it because of this, because somebody asked me, they're like, so they gaslit you? And I was like, come again? There's a movie on it. That's where the word comes from if you ever want to watch it. So.
Oh, I actually didn't know that. So I'll have to look that up later. Thank you.
That's where it comes from. Yep.
I just want to say I also learned about it this year. And there is a very good sociology paper, I can't remember who wrote it, but came out in 2019, called The Sociology of Gaslighting, which is, it's on the record, the academic record somewhere.
I'll have to check that out, let my soc teacher know. But Nicole, my next question is for you. So from a care advocate's perspective, can you tell us about the trauma and healing process and how we can help support survivors in their healing process?
Yeah, so I just want everyone to understand that trauma is a subjective experience. And so that means that different incidents will affect folks differently, and an individual's reaction to trauma will look differently. And the same idea applies for healing. Healing looks and feels different for every individual. And so it's important to know that and acknowledge that. And when supporting survivors, it's important to be accepting, non-judgmental about how they express their trauma and how they progress and what their healing process looks like, because it might look very different than how you expect it to. And so really, put aside those expectations and thoughts and ideas that you might have about it, and really just kind of be there for the person who has experienced them and has experienced them. And in regard to supporting survivors in their healing, I think the most basic way, and Amanda, you talked about this earlier, but just believe survivors, right? That is just the most basic way. And if nothing else sticks with everybody watching, please remember to just believe survivors when they share their experiences with you. It's harmful to blame them. And this can look like asking questions like, how were they dressed? Or, during when this happened, or asking them, or saying something like they were asking for it because they were intoxicated, right? Or minimizing their feelings, right? Like, oh, you shouldn't be feeling this way. Telling them you can't believe that the perpetrator, right, could do such a thing. And sort of any other opinion that you might want to disclose, and I'll stress on the word opinion there, reel those in a bit. You don't need to express them to a person who is disclosing their trauma to you, not necessary. And so I just ask you all to really believe survivors when they share your experiences with you.
Thank you so much for saying that, Nicole. I definitely agree. I mean, a lot of people don't realize how important it is to just offer support and validate someone. Like, validation is so important. Like, even for me, like, I'm someone who needs to be like reassured and feel validated a lot. And like, luckily I have the support that I need from my family and friends, but like, you need to support people and validate them, especially if they're going to come to you with such a crazy experience, something that they didn't want to go through. So it's important to just help people feel supported when they're going through something. So thank you so much for sharing that. And then my next question is for Amanda. So as a survivor, what has your healing process looked like? And do you have any advice for friends or loved ones so that they can better support the survivors in their lives?
So healing has been all over the place, honestly. It's kind of like a little bit different every day. And you don't realize like when something's gonna come up and make you feel like a little icky again. But I think one of the things that has been so important in my healing has been the way that my community and the people close to me have shown up. And also it's been really telling into who is in my life because of, who shows up and stuff. But I think the most, I've gotten asked this question a lot. And so I came up with an acronym, because I love an acronym, of how best support a survivor if they respond to you. And the acronym is LEARN. You just learn from the survivor. So the first thing you do is you listen, just that, listen. Like, you're gonna have some opinions, like Nicole said a second ago. Keep them to yourself. Those are yours, they're for you. Just listen, and then keep listening. And then after the L, and like, there will probably be like long pauses, or maybe, you know, the story might be all over the place. Don't try and like redirect, just let the person tell you what they want to tell you. And then you empower them by, it can be something little like thanking them for telling you, or you just say, I believe you, like, thanks so much for sharing this with me. Something that makes them feel safe and like they're not being met with judgment. After the E is an A. So that's when you ask them what they want to do. You don't ask them what happened. Don't ask them for those clarifying questions you had earlier while you were listening. Again, those are you can keep them for you. Ask the survivor how you can be of help to them. And then you respond by doing that. So, okay, unless they're like, I want you to go and like murder somebody. Don't do that. I don't advocate for that. But like, I've never heard a survivor say that. So usually it's like, I don't know, I just want to feel safe in my own bed again, or something like that. And that's something that you can help with. New bedding, take them shopping, or like get them something nice, like, or give them access to a different location to sleep, or, you know, find out what it is that they need and what they want. So that's, and then you respond by doing that. And then the N, which I found that a lot of institutions and systems that are supposed to help survivors, they forget about this altogether, is nurture. You nurture the survivor's healing by continuing to support them. And you don't just like drop them after you get the juicy story from them and then you can move on with your life. No, you like continue to show up and support them and make sure they're okay a year later, not necessarily by saying something triggering, but like, just, hey, was thinking of you. And so you just, so it's really easy. You just learn from your survivor.
I love that. That's a great acronym, and I'm glad that you taught it to us all tonight. So thank you. A lot of people don't realize, like we've been talking about, how important it is to validate people. And if someone's going to come to you and share an experience like this, it's not about you. So you don't need to share your opinion. You should be listening to them. You should be supporting them, validating them, asking them what they need for their healing process, because you're not them. You didn't go through that experience. So how would you know what they need? It's so important to ask questions, and I'm really happy you guys are all here, and thank you so much for sharing your expertise on this. So my next question is for Carter. Could you tell us more about the Game Over Commission and some of the important research being done?
Sure. And thank you, Amanda, for that Learn acronym. That was really cool. I enjoyed that. Learning throughout this whole conversation today. Sorry, your question. The Game Over Commission. The Game Over Commission is a panel of experts that's come together through Child USA to really assess what happened with this gymnastics case. Why, how could this happen, and for so long? And really, we're seeking to understand all of the factors that went into that, especially the systemic and institutional, the organizational and cultural factors involved, so that this doesn't happen again, right? So one thing that the commission has been doing is that they hold hearings where experts and survivors and other professionals can put on the record, which Child USA holds, what their experiences have been in athletics in this country, or in this case in particular. We also ran the first national survey in the US to assess prevalence of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse in elite athletics. And we're still analyzing the results of that survey, but we expect the reports to be out sometime next year. I can tell you from preliminary results, unfortunately, among elite athletes in the US, nearly 1 in 5 report some sort of physical abuse. That's it was 18.7% in our sample. And 8.4% report some sort of sexual assault, unfortunately. And perhaps very shocking, nearly a half of them, 42%, report some form of non-contact emotional abuse from a sport official or a peer athlete. So, I mean, what we're seeing is that what we see in this documentary, now we're just seeing it in the academic world too, is that in the US, elite athletics and perhaps other forms of athletics it's a really dangerous culture, right? So up next for the commission is to survey directly the population of survivors of Nasser himself to understand what their experience can tell us about this system, because a lot of them have insights that are unique to their experience that will tell us more about this. So that survey should launch with exactly, that's Amanda. This survey, I hope will take it, but it's no pressure from this academic, just neutrally saying, but I don't want to bias the results, but hopefully that will launch in the next couple of weeks, and we'll share it as widely as possible. So I think, and it will be available if you come to our website, we'll have a link up in a couple of weeks when it's released. But so that's really, I think, the next steps for the commission. And of course, hopefully leading to stringent policy and legal change.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Carter. I mean, it's so important that we figure out like what we need to fix exactly and where, and then we can start making improvements to the system itself. And I just want to say, like, before I forget, because I wanted to say this earlier, but healing is not a linear process. So for those of you that have experienced something like this or experienced any type of trauma, it is okay to not get better right away. It's okay that if you're dealing with this trauma for a while, it takes a while to heal sometimes. The only thing that matters is that you want to get better and you recognize what resources you have and where to get help. So that was just something I wanted to share to the audience before I forget. But my last question is for Nicole. So Nicole, is there anything else that you think universities could do to help make their campuses safe environments for survivors?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I think it's a good one too. I think campuses can support and advocate for funding for offices like CARE or other sexual violence, sexual harassment supportive services on their campus. These services are essential and they need to be seen as such. And I think we have a society where we're coming to understand that a bit more, but there are other campuses, even in California, where services such as what CARE offers isn't as well supported. And it makes it really, really difficult to do the work effectively. It takes a team. Like I said, we're a mighty team of 10, and that's small. We can do a lot of work. And so I know that other sexual violence, sexual harassment education, and advocacy and prevention programs and departments at different college campuses aren't as well funded. And so it makes it really hard. And I think programming such as this is really important as well, providing spaces and ample accessible opportunities to foster learning and have discussions about the impacts of sexual violence on campus is crucial to creating safer environments.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Nicole. So we actually just had a question come in, and it's great for you, Nicole, to answer. So the person said, I recently learned survivors can get evidentiary exams without reporting to law enforcement, so they can have evidence if needed down the road. How do people have the exam done, and what should they know beforehand?
Sure. I can answer that for this county. Lynna, you are in Merced. You might be able to answer and offer some insight in your county. So for our county, get in contact with an advocate at the CARE office, or our community partners, our Waymakers. They're the only sexual assault crisis department or unit in Orange County. So getting a hold of them and talking to one of the advocates can then start and initiate a process of getting a SART exam where you aren't going to report, right? So it's called a Wawa exam. So it's a right, everybody has it. People who maybe just want to have evidence collected from their body, but don't feel like they can go through the reporting process and aren't ready to do that yet. So talk to an advocate, get in hold of an advocate, and an advocate can help you make that happen. Lynna, I don't know if you have more information about how to go about that in Merced.
Yeah, so Jane Doe reporting, so per the California Penal Code 293A in the government section 625, 6254, I think. So per those codes, and that should be all through California, individuals have the right to do a Jane Doe reporting. And so initially, I've had a couple Jane Doe reportings. Initially, we do have to call law enforcement so that we can set up the SART, which is the Sexual Assault Response Team Kit with the forensic exam in our county. And so because we don't have a SART here in Merced, we do travel to Fresno, so we do provide the transportation to and from the SART exams, Fresno or Los Baños. And so what happens is they take the report and instead of putting the individual's name, they'll put confidential. And so throughout the report, it'll say, you know, confidential individual reported this, and that, whatever it was. That way we can have at least something linking to a report number. They also provide individuals with kind of like a pink form, a slip that kind of corresponds to their report. So in the event that they do want to make a report, they have that. Because it is a Jane Doe, none of the information is, or none of the survivor's information is placed in the report itself. So they really do need to keep that, that kind of pink slip to be able to go back and reopen this case. Either the pink slip or the case number, because they will be provided with the case number. And as far as I know here, I don't know if it's there also. So the evidence that is collected will be sealed and frozen immediately after. And then it does stay with the facility for up to 3 months so that survivors can kind of gear what they want to do within that time and work with survivor advocates to be able to get to a place where they're ready to follow through with the report. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I actually had no idea about any of this, so learning a lot today. And then my last question is actually for Carter. So this question is, athletics departments across schools are often separate from other departments, which I think feeds into the cycle of abuse. What can departments do to maintain a collaboration process where athletic survivors or victims are still heard?
That's a tough one. I welcome any of my fellow panelists having ideas on this one. Because it's true that, you know, departments and administrative sections of schools don't like to talk very much unless they have to. But that sort of feeds into this idea that of a separate culture, you know, where these norms are really self-reinforcing. So one thing that we can do is educate people to be, for lack of a better term, culturally literate, to understand what a norm is and what its place is in the world. Right? Norms are very powerful. Just because they're social doesn't mean they're fake, but because they're social, it means they can change. So when we notice we're being influenced by the culture of a space, we can step outside that space and check with our friends in another space and see if that's what's going on. Is this okay? Is this safe? So, I mean, I would recommend that sort of thing, but that's because I have a strong interest in anthropology. I'm not sure. I don't have enough experience with administrative organization of higher education. So if anyone else has any ideas, please.
I mean, I don't either, but I would just assume that maybe like the Office of Compliance or some type of accountability can be made. But does anyone else have any more expertise on this? I was literally just guessing.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. So the question was, athletics departments across schools are often separate from other departments, which may feed into the cycle of abuse. What can departments do to maintain a collaboration process where athletic survivors and victims are continued to be heard?
I can speak a little bit on this on what we do at UCI. And so there is actually a person, and I am forgetting the title, who has the duty of really connecting CARE and the athletics department. And so I think with that position, it really, really helps to, if somebody were to come to this person in the athletics department, right, an athlete were to come to this person because they're trusted and they're known, they can educate them about CARE and refer them to CARE and bring them over and make a warm handoff and say, hey, I know Nicole over there. She's one of the advocates. Come chat with her, right? So I think collaboration is key, like getting to know those departments, right? And I think at a large university, we're so siloed to each of our departments. So really breaking down those silos and building collaboration. And I think at our office, our violence prevention coordinators do such a good job of that. And again, it goes back to kind of funding, right? We need campuses to fund these types of programming so that these things can happen. We just recently got 2 full-time violence prevention coordinators when we had 1 prior to that. So with 2, we're able to do so much more work and reach so much more departments and have created and fostered so much better collaboration. So I think that's an idea that works or that could work.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know I've known about the CARE, or I actually went to UCI for undergrad as well. And I've known about the CARE office since freshman year. So I can say that UCI is doing a great job with outreach because I was aware of the services that they had available for students. But wow, what a wealth of knowledge was shared by our panelists tonight. And I'm just absolutely blown away by your answers to all the questions. And again, really appreciate you all being here. So Nicole, Amanda, Carter, and Lynna, do you have any final words that you'd like to share before we close up?
My audio cut out really quickly, so I apologize if you had said anything to me and I didn't respond. I just wanted to say that. Okay, cool. And also, since I'm talking, I just want to say again how important it is that we believe survivors and we have an environment, we culture an environment that allows for people to talk about their experiences without judgment and without the expectation of them then making big decisions or doing things about it. I saw in the Q&A somebody had mentioned that the they talked about the criminal justice system a little bit, and I personally refer to it as the criminal legal industry because I don't know if I so much see justice in there or system. So I think that is really important. It was a great observation. And when I spoke earlier about being in a safe place to report, I hope I did not report to police because I knew that would not be that is typically not a safe place for all survivors. So that is really, I think that's really important in thinking about what kind of things what kind of systems we create moving forward in replacement or to replace the old systems that aren't really about justice anyway.
Thank you for lending that term, Amanda. I haven't heard that before, but that is a great way to explain it, much more so than the criminal justice system. So criminal and legal, what was it? Criminal and legal.
So somebody that I look up to called it the criminal legal system. And I was like, that's awesome. And I was like, industry, criminal legal industry. So
there you go.
That's what we call it now.
Love it. I love it. I will be using that definitely. Thank you for that. And yeah, that comment was actually made by our director, Mandy Mount of CARE at UCI. And yes, I think that is so important. And another aspect is to really, when we work with survivors, is to really ask them what justice will look like for them, right? And not just kind of rely on the criminal legal industry, right? For that, or their Title IX, for instance, really kind of working with the person and identifying what justice can look like and using our imagination and supporting them through that, because really, you know, my lens here is to support healing, right? So whatever that might look like for that person is what I want to support. And thank you all. You all were great panelists, and it's an honor to be on this with.
I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to my co-panelists. It was a great talk. I feel like I learned a lot. And I guess, I don't know if I could say anything better than what Amanda and Nicole have just said. But I'll just say again that I really think, you know, we ought to approach others in a trauma-informed way, in the way that we are helping them flourish, because that will keep them safest and happiest, and it'll help us too in the long run. And I think that's really an important way to go about daily life.
Thank you, everyone. I'd just like to say, you know, reach out to your local advocates, your local nonprofits, you know, get that information, because like we've all mentioned, this is a learning experience for all of us. And so if you get that education, reach out. You know, we do presentations. I know the CARE office does presentations. We're more than willing to come out. If departments like the athletics department want a presentation for students or staff and faculty, we're more than welcome to go ahead and do that, because we want individuals to know what their rights are. We want them to know and educate themselves so that if an incident does happen, we know where to go. So thank you all.
Thank you all for those final words, and thank you, Lynna, for sharing some more resources and telling people how to advocate for themselves. It's really important. And no doubt all of you, your presence here has impacted the students, student athletes, and members of UC Irvine and UC Merced communities and the other attendees here. So thank you so much again. To the attendees, thank you so much for being here on behalf of UC Speaks Up, Encourage First, and the Foundation for Global Sports Development and Sidewinder Films. We hope that you all learned something new today and feel empowered by this discussion. I certainly learned a lot of new things. I love that LEARN acronym, by the way, so thank you, Amanda. And everyone attending, again, know that if you're going through an experience with sexual violence or any type of trauma, really, that you're supported and that you are not alone and you have resources available for you. So please also remember to look out for the follow-up survey to be sent from UC Speaks Up after this discussion concludes. And if you're able, please fill out the survey, as it contributes to necessary research that measures how we can make an impact in our communities and move forward in a positive manner. Your contributions make a huge difference. So if you can fill it out, you would also have a chance to win multiple prizes that include several gift cards and Courage First swag. Again, if you feel that you need support, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can access the following resources that are on the page. I'm pretty sure you guys can see the page now, but it's ucspeaksup.org/resources, the UCI CARE office, UC Merced CARE office, or you can call or text the National Abuse Hotline at 1-800-422-4453. And thank you all so much for attending. I hope you all have a great rest of your night. And for those of you preparing for finals next week like me, good luck on all your finals. I hope you do amazing. Thank you, everyone. And thank you again to the panelists for being here. I really appreciate it.